Hey, everybody. Good morning. Much gratitude for checking out another episode of the Enhance Your World show, hosted by myself, Chris Albaugh. And today I have special guest, performer, mindfulness coach, Janey Brown. Janey, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. Did I give you a decent enough intro? We didn't talk about that at the
You know
beginning.
what? To be honest, I'm a lot of things, so I'm
Yeah.
sure that'll do.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like identity labels either. So like I always get like stage fright there. So that's a good thing to talk about since we're talking about overcoming performance anxiety this morning, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely one of the most common fears among people, and one of the biggest fears. Like it actually outweighs death. Death comes second in the priorities of people's fears in the world. It's insane.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to lack of acceptance. If they're not sure of why they're doing what they're doing, or they're results oriented and they know they can't control results. I mean, that's why I get anxious because like I do
Yeah,
something for like the means to the end.
Yeah, that's an aspect of it. I mean, it's actually quite, it can be quite complex, but it can also be quite simple. In my research, what I've been noticing is usually the fears and anxieties from people, whether it be fear of presenting in front of your boss or fear of getting on stage or fear of getting in front of the camera, it usually comes down to shame and unworthiness. There's other aspects of what that means to people, but when you
Okay.
break it all down to its fundamental core, it has to do with shame, and which creates unworthiness essentially, and
Okay.
unworthiness can create shame. So I mean, definitely, like if you don't have the self-awareness that you need to know if you're even in the right field or not, then performance anxiety can literally just come because you need to change,
Right.
right? But if you're in the right field and you're getting performance anxiety and it's something that you do want to do and do want to be a part of, then usually you just have to take a deeper look at what what the inner critic is saying about you and saying to you, what you believe about yourself, your belief systems. And like I said, what I've been finding out is that it usually comes down to, this sort of this core, deep shame in
Okay.
people. Whatever the trigger is to cause your shame is different in each person.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I saw performance anxiety in other ways. Of course, in beginnings of my career, being in the adult industry, it was very interesting to see the male performance issues. Um,
Hmm.
you can't hide ego or confidence
Yeah,
in the
right,
adult
right.
industry because certain things just wouldn't work sometimes. I mean, and you felt for the people, but that's interesting that you say shame because maybe it was because they felt shameful for what they were about to do. Maybe I don't know.
Well,
Um,
think about like, let me break it down for you.
yeah,
Shame at its core
right.
is literally just a fear, a human fear, a common human fear, all humans experience this. Um, it's a fear of having an imperfection or having something about you be noticed or seen by another that deems you unworthy of human connection.
Okay.
And human connection is extremely, extremely vital for survival. Like there's tons of studies on this right now where, basically if you don't have human connection, you just won't survive. Yes, food and water are like the fundamentals, but human connection is just as critical. And
Hmm.
shame is the fear that you're unworthy of that connection.
Right.
So if somebody deep down has that fear, right,
Right.
and they're on like because everybody expresses it in their own way. Some people might be very timid on stage and they'll freeze. Some people might overperform. But for men, shame manifests in one way, and that's never show weakness. They're terrified of showing that they're imperfect in some way. They're terrified of showing or being seen for who they really are because it'll show weakness. But yeah, so that could be a result.
Yeah, I could identify with that. I mean, I believe that just like you do, acceptance is everything. It's the motivating factor for everything. Why we do everything, whether we're conscious of it or not.
The connection, yeah.
Yeah.
The human connection. Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, why do people get up every day and do what they do? If you ask them, it will be to pay the bills for their family or to, you know, it's always connected to greater than themselves.
Absolutely, yeah.
Except for when you become awakened, if there's such a thing, where then you go, I do it because this is my intention. This is how I want the resolve. Like,
this is what I value in life. Like, these are my values.
Right.
Yeah. The bottom line is, like, we are biologically hardwired for human connection from the time of birth until the time of death. So that never changes. Like, no matter what, that'll always be a need. And it's a need that, unfortunately, society has created shame around, which is interesting, because it's like, well, we shouldn't need anybody and we shouldn't rely on people and independence and rah rah rah. But the problem is that people are denying the fact that this is a survival need. This isn't just a luxury,
right?
You know, and it's a need from birth until death.
Right.
So the faster we can accept the fact that we need each other and we need connection. And that doesn't mean like I need to be connected to everybody and accepted by everybody. It's, you know, you have your core people that that you can share love with. But as soon as we start accepting that, and it stops being about, well, you're weak if you need people, the happier we're going to be, and the more honest we're going to be.
Absolutely, because, you know, I mean, I believe that, you know, we can't fix our problems as you know, I have a system that I teach, it's GAGE method, but the dual polarity of a relationship would be the two me's or the two I's. So, you know, when we come into unity, that, you know, through conversation and through action and through emotions and being, that's how we create our harmony. You know, I've studied a lot of, you know, famous people or anyone that's been immortalized in history. And really the only thing that separates them from anyone else is their open and honesty to connect with other people.
Right. The courage to be vulnerable and to be seen for who you really are.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. As I'd mentioned to you before, like I've been studying a lot of Brene Brown and Glenn and Doyle Melton and their whole like philosophy. And Brene Brown's a doctor and she's a researcher of vulnerability, you know, done thousands and thousands of interviews and has, you know, 13 years of data and all this stuff. And she, you know, her sort of belief, and I definitely share this belief, is that basically the way of the heart, like the path to the heart, is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. But vulnerability is basically one of the bravest things that a human can do, because it's so, it can be so excruciating to just sort of own like the depths of your feelings, or to accept the outcome that you could still be rejected,
right,
even if you're vulnerable, but do it anyway.
Well,
and that's why it's a brave thing to do, you know?
Well, what I found is when you don't accept that's a possibility, then you're just fooling yourself for a longer hurt.
For sure.
You know, it's you know, when you have a, you know, I mean, the only reason we verbalize anything is because we're scared of the darkness between our thoughts and our feelings. So if we're feeling something or we're thinking something, you know, and we finally get enough courage up or compassion enough to say something, because I think compassion and courage have to be the same thing, close to it. I just think the words
I would agree
them.
I would agree with that, because compassion, in my mind, is sort of, I mean, you have to get in touch with your own pain and your own shame and your own fears in order to have compassion for yourself and for others.
Right.
So in order to get in touch with yourself, you have to be able to be willing to be vulnerable. And in order to be willing to be vulnerable, you have to be brave. And so I would agree that you need courage to be compassionate.
I'm simple. I'll admit that. I try to simplify everything. So a lot of the labels I use, I always look to see how I can break it down to the common denominator. because
Mm-hmm.
I think when we do all these variations of frequencies, like what's the difference between happiness and bliss? Well, that depends on the individual's definition.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I guess there's certain differences in words that do make a difference. Like, for example, when people say, okay, well, how do you overcome performance anxiety? I say, well, you don't, actually.
Right.
You never overcome performance anxiety. You just learn to manage it. You know what I mean? So, like, in a way, when you learn to manage your performance anxiety, you're overcoming something that's diminishing the quality of your life and your performances, but it's still going to be there. Like, anxiety never really goes away. You just learn how to not react to it and not perpetuate it into something that's worse.
So would a better term just be you accept that it's there?
Yeah, I actually have three sort of little steps that, not that, I don't want to make it sound easy because it's not, but it's easy to remember the steps, but it's not necessarily easy to do. I have a deep compassion for people struggling with anxiety because it's a very serious illness and issue and in our society. And so I don't want to, I guess where I'm coming from is a sensitive place. I don't want to make it sound like it's a 1, 2, 3 process. Like you can do it right now and like you know what I mean? Like it's something it takes time and it's a multi-pronged approach. But you're saying like, okay, well, you know, is accepting anxiety kind of the way to help manage it? And it is. But first you have to know that you actually have it. I actually struggled with anxiety, performance anxiety for like 15 years before I understood that it was actually causing a problem in my life and actually something that I needed to deal with, right? Because it was also affecting my actual life, not just on stage. And so the first step in managing your anxiety is understanding A, what it is, and B, having the awareness that you actually have it and are experiencing it. And there's a difference between anxiety and just nervousness. Right? Nervousness, people like you're going to get nervous before you go on stage. It doesn't matter how much like good of a grip you have on managing your stress and your anxiety. You're just going to still get nervous. But anxiety, like fear, that is when you start to break down. That's when it starts to affect your health. That's when it starts to affect your performances and your quality of life. So understanding, you know, what degree you're experiencing of performance anxiety. So awareness is the first A. The second A is acceptance, like you said. You know, the only thing worse than having an anxiety attack or feeling anxiety is having to hide that you have one. So if you're in public and you're having a panic attack and you don't feel like you can do that, you're going to feel like you have to hide. And it's the worst feeling because it just makes you more and more anxious, you know, panicking to try and find a place that you can kind of like let yourself go and sort of sit in your feelings, you know? So acceptance is the second thing, but also, so not just being able to be in a place where you're free to express your emotions, but also understanding, like we have a tendency as people to sort of say, I shouldn't be feeling this right now. Like this should not be happening. And the more we do that, the worse the symptoms get. So acceptance is a major component. And then the third A, so I call it the 3 A's or the TrifectA.
I agree with acceptance. You know, avoiding something only extends our misery. So
oh my God, does it ever?
If we're not happy in what we're doing with our life, if we're not happy in our relationships, if we're not happy with ourselves, yes, that comes from mindfulness, it comes from awareness, it comes from consciousness, and it comes from acceptance. Okay, this is where I am in my now present. All I have is my present. The only thing that is consistent in my life is my presence of my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions. So how can I go from here to where I want to go?
Amazing. Yeah, you can't change without, first of all, knowing you need to change, and you can't change without accepting that you need to change. So awareness and acceptance are definitely the first major 2 steps. And then the third one, so the third A of the trifecta, is adjust. Now, everybody is going to have a different method of adjustment. Like I said, this is a multi-pronged approach. It is not, okay, well, you're just going to meditate for 15 minutes a day, and then all of a sudden all your problems are going to go away. In my program, I use a lot of breath exercises to balance the nervous system so that we can interfere with the body's physiological response to stress. I use mindfulness and meditation and journaling exercises to work with the mind, but exercising and eating healthy is also key too, right? So it's a multi-pronged approach, but it also might come down to maybe you need therapy. Like maybe it's that severe and you need healing. Like it's not just about, creating healthier habits for yourself and getting to know yourself better and just understanding what the inner critic says. It might be, you had a trauma in your past and it's causing you, to feel a certain way about yourself, which is causing shame, which is causing you to really struggle to overcome what's holding you back when you perform. So there's tons of different methods. As I said before, adjustments can involve like breath exercises, mindfulness exercises to help with the stories that the amygdala puts on ourselves. And, writing is huge because it organizes confusion. Even if it's messy and enigmatic on the paper itself, it's a sounding board. So if you don't have anybody that you can talk to at that time, like it's sort of a way that you can admit to yourself, like, I am ashamed of this, or I am scared of this, or I feel unworthy, and shame needs a voice to diminish and to die. Right. So it's a way for you to, it's sort of like a way for you to get your thoughts out and admit to yourself, like, what's going on if you don't have anybody immediate. It's an outlet for ownership of shame. It puts space between you and the experience. It's an amazing, amazing tool, writing it, but it's not the, be all end all. Confiding in a loved one.
Yeah, it releases.
Yeah, it helps to release it, for sure. Confiding in a loved one is huge. Somebody that's earned the right to hear your story and not trying to fix you,
right?
But because you're not broken, you just need to be heard and accepted, right? But confiding in a loved one, like that loved one that has earned the right to hear your story and that you need that emotional and love connection with, like that, I can't stress that enough. But it used to be something I didn't want to admit. It used to be something that it was like, no, like breath, mindfulness, therapy, like all these things can take care of it. It's like you still need that connection, right? So these are all different methods of adjustment. I feel the need to express that because I think people get too wrapped up in a one-size-fits-all. They get too wrapped up in a formula. They get too wrapped up in a marketing tactic. And it's like, you know what? These are all things, and change, like we talked about before. You need to know if maybe you're not in the right field. Maybe this isn't for you,
Well, unconditional love isn't based on conditions.
Right.
And I always go back to, Emerson on methods, and the reason for it is because it makes sense to me. And I murder his quotes because, it was an old, talk, and it just needs to be updated. But he inspired it to say, as far as methodologies, there is only, there's millions. And as far as principles, there's only a few. So the person who focuses on methods without principles is doomed to meet failure. The person who focuses on principles can choose any methods that he chooses. And that's self-discovery. And I totally 100% agree with you. That's why, the GAGE method is based off principles and not a how-to. Because
exactly.
If someone isn't ready to listen to binaural beats and meditate, because they're not ready to accept that yet, but they like to,
or they don't resonate with it. Like that just might not be, it's like not a right or wrong thing. It's just that's not their modality of learning.
So, but they like to color.
Right.
So let them color. Or let them paint.
Totally.
Or go for a nature walk. Or some people like to ride a motorcycle. It's
Absolutely.
just to let go and release. And just release the identities, the stressors, the ego that we have to build up each and every day because we're afraid to let people in, because if we let the wrong people in, they'll hurt us. But what I found through my life is they'll get in anyway. And that's a good acceptance. But they all give awarenesses. They all give you little insights. They give you all these beautiful things to be grateful for. I mean, my business partner who helped destroy my businesses taught me a great amount of things, and I'm very grateful for him. And it took me a long time to understand that. And come from that place. And, we talked about, it takes a long time and it's tough. And it can be, or it can be real simple. We choose our own level of misery. When I was an addict, I was an addict till I quit. It didn't matter how long I wanted to accept that, and cigarettes was the hardest one for me. So,
Yeah, right.
and I took it for 20 years, but that was because it was ingrained in my head since I was born that it was hard to quit. Because when I asked my parents to quit as a kid, they told me how hard it was to quit. Don't start; it's hard to quit. So it was ingrained in my head. My neural connections were so strong to that I had that communication with myself. And then after the loss of the businesses, after I decided to come from a place of being unconditional love, not only to other people, because that's what we're good at, but to myself as well. I said, this is no longer something that I can do anymore. It's being destructive. I could do it if I want to, but I could be better if I want to too. The BS of my belief system is why I'm here.
Yeah.
But I don't hold that to any higher regard to anyone else's BS belief system, because
Totally.
how we unify, how we get together, how we, come together in unity is how we grow unconditionally. People who are abusive or people who are, oppressive, I don't have time for them. I want them to get better. If they come to me in a place where they're saying they want to get better, well, then I'm here to be of service. But if I'm oppressing the oppressor by telling them they're wrong, how am I right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it comes down to shame again too. Like, I heard an interview on, I think it was Tim Ferriss's show with Brene Brown again, and she said, he was saying, well, I guess to some degree, like, shame serves, a fundamental purpose in that, like, if a child molester, did something bad, like, to shame that person, it would serve a purpose, because then that person would know not to do that or whatever. And she's like, I disagree with that, because it's like you said, it's basically just oppressing the oppressor. The person already has problems. You know what I mean? Like, they already have problems if that's where they're at. To put more shame on them it's just not going to change anything. It's not going to do any better for that person. It's not going to do any better for the world. It's just not. And she's sort of like, if the data has shown that shame under any circumstance has worked in positive ways, like, this would be a different conversation. But she's like, it just hasn't. It's never, ever, ever helps the situation in any way.
Right.
So it's like, and just kind of going back to what you said, it's one thing if somebody's coming to you and asking for guidance. It's another thing, if they're just struggling or wallowing in their own, misery and problems. It still doesn't make sense for other people to look at that and be like, well, they're choosing to be in their problems, so they deserve to feel that way, and, like, shame on them. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to do anything either. It's sort of like, it's like all or nothing. It's like, well, if they're not looking for help, then I'm just going to beat them down more. Like, it makes no sense to do that.
Right. And a visualization that a friend of mine, Dr. Sharon Live, she had told me a visualization of when people are unaware, they're like, they have machetes, and they're just slashing. Like when they're in depression or they're angry or they get emotional, right? If they're in drug abuse, if they're in these different states of suffering. And until they're tired, until they're ready to put the machetes down, if we go in there and try to stop them, they're just going to cut us.
Yeah.
Because they're not ready.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's a really cool visualization.
Yeah, and my brother struggles with addiction still, and my parents still smoke and all that, and they gripe about things all the time, and I'm like, well, my brother's thing is, well, I don't want to get sick again, because he's on the opiates and pills and heroin and all that stuff, so he's got the withdrawals to deal with, and I'm like, but you're already sick. Like, that's not you're avoiding the acceptance that you're already sick. Like, and until you get better and go through that withdrawal process, will you never have that withdrawal process again? Because you're either going to have to feed the addiction to the point to where you're never feeling a negative effect of it. And I'm a former addict, so I mean, I understand. It wasn't me chasing, like people say, well, you chased a high. I was a coke addict. No, I was chasing me wanting to rip my face off because my face was on fire. You know what I mean? Like,
interesting. Right. It wasn't like you weren't necessarily going for like the great feelings anymore. It was like it was like the bad feelings were so bad.
Right.
That this was all you could do. Yeah, that's insane.
Like,
that's really hard.
As long as you were doing it, you didn't have that problem. But once you came off of it, that's when, you know, you had the negative symptoms. And luckily for coke, like, it's not a long-term process to get detox off of that. And I was lucky enough to have my house robbed. So it was a very good time for me to get clean.
Oh, wow. So that's interesting. So you got robbed of all your supplies, and that's what did it?
Well, robbed of everything. They came in, kicked in my door, and they didn't get my stuff because I had that with me. But they took everything else. And I was in the adult industry at the time. They took all my tapes. They took all my release forms. They took everything. And, I mean, basically left my clothes, our bed, and then they left all our sex toys because the cops got a kick out of that there was a house full of, sex toys scattered around the house. Because I was in the adult industry. We used a lot of them.
Yeah.
They were like little kids in high school, man, giggling over, like, all the dildos. It was like, dude, come on. My house was robbed. Like, you're taking more pictures of the toys that they didn't take than the fact that they broke into my house. This is crap. But
yeah, that's brutal.
It was all great awarenesses because, I mean, I grew from that. I understood that I brought that on myself because why was I robbed? Well, I had more than everyone else in the neighborhood. I partied like a rock star. I didn't hide it. And I traveled a lot. So, I mean, I was asking for it. I was never, you know what I mean? Like, and so that was my awareness of, I have to grow beyond this way.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew, how I gained the awarenesses, how I accepted it, how I grew past it, and, used it to grow into the, mainstream industry where I was able to help musicians, comics, mainstream actors, build careers. So, it's very cool what you're doing. And I think anxiety performance is one of those things that everybody deals with, even if they don't think it's performance anxiety because they're not performing, but they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another point. A good point is that everybody can be affected by this, like kids in school having to deliver presentations, like executives having to deliver, present at, boardroom meetings or whatever, everybody is affected by this. It just depends on the degree that you're affected by it. So the thing with me was that 15 of my 20 years of performance, I was in fear. But the thing is when people found out about this, like when I admitted this, people were like, what? Mm-hmm. Like, I've seen you perform. You slay. What are you talking about? Like, people didn't believe me when I said, like, I was prescribed medication because, like, I had so much fear. And the point I'm trying to make is, like, people can squeeze by. Like, you can get by with, crippling anxiety and still do a good job. But the difference is how you feel in your life.
Right.
So it's either going to affect the quality of your performance and your life, or it's just going to affect the quality of your life. Affecting the quality of your performance sucks enough, but your life, that's where you got to draw the line, and that it'll always affect that when you're struggling with anxiety and not doing anything about it,
Right.
So it really comes down to, like, how did you feel, and how do you feel when you're on stage, and how did you feel after, and like how is that serving you mentally, physically, emotionally, and usually if it's serving you in a great way, it's serving others in a great way too,
Right.
Even if it's unconscious. Like, people can watch an entertaining performance, but it might not move them like it would if you would come from an authentic place.
Right. Well, and I've also found, like, the fake it till you make it. Like, I did that. I did that, and I never made it. Because,
right.
Even when I had the outer successes, like you said, I wasn't there. And I was dumbing myself down. I was numbing myself out. And eventually, my habits took control and destroyed everything
Right.
that I've built.
I totally resonate with that. Like me too. I say like my fears robbed me of two really, really vital things, like my youth and my time. People can always try to compare worse things that could have happened, but to me, I really value time. And youth is a representation of that. It's not about like looking young or whatever. It's about having the like time on your side.
Right.
Not that I'm saying it's too late, but I'm just saying like I value time so much because it's so precious. Luckily, I caught it now. I'm 30, so I've got lots of years ahead. But it's a regret.
Really?
It's a regret that it's a regret that I
Okay.
appreciate because
Okay.
I appreciate the fact that I regret it. Like,
So you can be
if I didn't
grateful
regret
for
it, I would still do the same stuff. Like, so
Right.
regret is kind of like the motivation. Like, I never, ever, ever want to get to a place where I feel like I regret again.
Would
You know what I'm saying?
Would you think it's regret, or do you think it's gratitude? Because which one you think would be more empowering?
Well, it's both for me. Like, I have to accept that there's both there.
Okay.
Regret is there because I know I could have done something differently. But that's the other thing is I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the support system. I didn't have the awareness. Like, my parents had no idea what I was struggling with. And I'm like, in my program, I'm writing out blogs and stuff of literal, visceral experiences that I had. And it's terrifying, like,
Right.
to read. But my parents had no idea. Like, nobody had any idea. We didn't have performance mindset coaches in my, when I was 10. Like, we didn't have that in the small town of Brockville, Ontario. Like, that didn't even exist. And online coaching wasn't even a thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
this is
yeah,
like, we're talking like 15 years ago. Like, this is new. It's even just a new thing that people are accepting, like the openness of even admitting that they have fears, performance or otherwise, or admitting that they have anxiety, performance or otherwise. So, I mean, like,
I think the social awareness has opened up. Whether you want to believe in 2012 we moved into the age of the being, so now
Right.
we're a more heartfelt society, or if it's finally just that our logical minds are
Right.
now seeing through enough.
There's more
cycles.
research on it. There's
Yeah,
more
that you're
acceptance
just
of
like,
it. Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Well, and so, yeah. And so just to answer your question, like, that's why I say I have both. I have regret because I know that I could have done things differently, but I have compassion and gratitude because I didn't have the tools that I needed to do something different.
Yeah.
So, and I have gratitude that I figured it out by now instead of another 10 years from now. So,
Right.
like, there's both, like, and I'm okay with that because
Okay.
regret is a positive driving force in my life as like, it's not something that I'm like every day I like think about my regrets and like
Right.
that's the place I operate from. Like,
Right.
I don't agree with that, but to have that feeling of, fuck, if I don't do what I'm, if I don't do what I'm supposed to be doing, if I'm not living a true authentic path, I will end up with this feeling and I don't want to feel this feeling.
Right.
So to feel regret is a great feeling in and of itself, just to prevent you from wanting to feel it again.
So you're grateful for your regrets.
I'm grateful for my regret, exactly, and
Yeah.
and I think that it's healthy. I
Right.
think that's the bottom line.
I heard a thing Tony Robbins said on this, and he was talking about Bruce Springsteen and Janis Joplin, and
Right.
they were both his client, and he was talking to our friends or whatever, and he was having conversations with Bruce Springsteen, and he said, Tony asked him, he said, "What makes you know you're ready to go out on stage?" He goes, "My hands start shaking, get sweaty. I got butterflies in my belly, and I just get juiced. I just get all amped up, and that's how I know I'm ready to go up on stage."
Right.
Like, he's using the anxiety that most people would label as an anxiety as the empowerment to have the energy to go up on stage. And now Janis Joplin, on the other hand, wouldn't go up on stage anymore because she had butterflies in her stomach. Her hands were
Right.
she was feeling all anxious. So again, I believe it's all energy. Like before we were born and given labels, it's just energy. So,
but at the same time, it just depends on the place that it's coming from. It's the same physiological response. The sympathetic nervous system will create a reflexive physiological response to the body, whether you're happy about your anxiety or you're not.
Right.
but it all depends on where it's coming from in you. If you've accepted yourself and you're coming from an authentic place and you're strong and you're powerful, that's going to be your Bruce Springsteen. But if you're struggling with something and you're unable to connect with your authenticity and you're hiding something, that's when your anxiety is going to turn into anxiety instead of it being just nervousness, you know?
Right.
It's not just a decision, though. It's not just like, well, I'm going to channel this into something good. It's really, really doing the work and becoming self-aware on why it's being caused and then being able to adjust.
You know, you have to grow. So, yeah, I mean, you have to come from, you know, that state. And we only have the now moment. Now, how we hold true to that now moment is our consistency. So I agree that, you know, it could be difficult in the moment because that's all we got. What happened in the past has already happened. It is what it was. You know, and what it is right now is what it is. And what it will be is what it will be. We're not smarter than the universe. We only have the consistency of our now. And, you know, I agree. It comes from a state of communication. And it does take a time to reprogram yourself.
Well, and your now isn't going to have as much quality if you don't prepare for it. So, like I said, if you're struggling with psychological issues and those issues are causing you to feel shame underneath everything, and that shame is causing you to want to hide before you go on stage, then you're going to get anxiety. And if you haven't done the work around that stuff, like you're going to continue to get anxiety no matter what now you exist in.
Exactly.
So the work of performance anxiety is done off the stage.
Right.
So it's all about like how you prepare for the now that dictates how much quality that now has.
Right. Well, it's the
and
intention.
how much you're able to live in it, right?
You know, it's the intention. You know, it's how do you? I mean, and that's what I really try to remind people. It's the intention you live by. You know, if you want to be happy, then that is your standard. When you're not, you go, oh, I'm not happy. What do I have to do? And that's the part of the awareness part. Like it's a good awareness to know that you have anxiety. It's an acceptance.
Right.
Absolutely, 100%. How do you grow from that though?
Yeah, that's what we talked about before, the adjustment period. Like you pick your own potion, you know, whether it's breath, whether it's exercise, whether it's therapy, like, but those are the things that prepare you to be in the next best place in the next moment.
Right. Yeah, you have a system that you've developed because it worked for you. You know, just like the gratitude method is what I use because that's what worked for me. You know, gratitude first. What can I appreciate? Because if it's a growth thing, then I can let it go. Gives me the full spectrum of awareness. With the unity of myself, others, whatever, I can extend my growth through the observation and experiences of other life forces. That allows me to be enlightened because I'm only aware of my now. You know, my knowledge that I had in the past is my past knowledge. Now, how that affects my now is how I apply it in my now. And I won't know the results of that until the future.
It still takes those 2 first days.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm saying is, in order to change anything, like, this is what's so beautiful about this work is that it's transferable to everything else in your life. Like, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to overcome it. It's like when you can become aware at any given moment and then accept that thing you're aware of, then you can adjust. It doesn't matter what it is. So it's not even a system that's like, like this system isn't even mine. Like, you know what I mean?
That's
like
universal. That's universal.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
The only difference between mine and yours is I have a few more steps, and instead of adjust,
like
grow.
Like different letters.
Yeah. I mean,
totally.
So you know, I totally 100%. We're in complete 100% harmony with the methodology, with the universal principles behind it of how we shift from where we are now to where we want to be. Janey, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I mean, I'm so grateful that you did say yes, and we actually able to have this chat. I think what you're doing is awesome. I love the fact that you're coming from the space of being. I love that. That is amazing.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's definitely been quite the electric conversation between us, and I'm so happy to hear like your transitions in your life and what you're doing with your experiences, and I think you're going to help so many people with it for sure.
Well, thank you. And I have the website JaneyBrownLifestyle.com. Is that the best way to get a hold of you, or do you have other preferences?
Yeah, you know what? That one is more of a landing page to show my like wellness expertise, but my main website is just JaneyBrown.com.
Perfect. So any plans, anything else that you want to share with anyone before we wrap it up today?
I guess just keep an eye out for this program launch. I'm still in the process of developing the curriculum and the content, but in the very early new year, maybe towards the end of this year, I'll be setting up my first launch. So I'm really excited, and I can't wait. It's going to be of such great value, not only to your performance part of your life, whether you're a sales rep or whether you're in school or an actual performer, and it'll also bring value to just your everyday life, because the things that you need to come to terms with in order to overcome or manage anxiety and performance anxiety are transferable to all areas of your life. So, yeah.
Perfect. And when that's ready, I would love to have you come on, and we'll do a webinar together so we can promote that and do a whole thing, and we'll do all that for you. 'Cause that
Absolutely.
sounds awesome. And with that is the end of our show. Please remember, when you continue to enhance your life, you're enhancing our world through the collective unity of unconditional love. And for that, much love and gratitude for everything that you are, everything that you do, and everything that you choose to be.